Good afternoon, everyone. This is my first series on my long-term ownership experience with my 2014 Jaguar F-Type V8S. What a mouthful. And so during the course of this series, I will review my personal experiences, opinions, and thoughts in both a subjective and objective manner. Just give you as much information as I can to help you decide if the F-Type is the right car for you. So with that, in this series, I'm going to cover my long-term ownership costs, both my costs, the first owner's costs. I'm going to do another video on maintenance and reliability. I'm sure that's what's on everyone's mind, right? Besides the cost is, hey, or is it going to break the bank? Quick video on F-Type quality, modifications, the F-Type's interior and details and kind of things to look out for with that. And then, of course, a review just on F-Type exhausts for self-explanatory reasons. The car sounds fucking fantastic. So with that, a quick overview on the F-Type. So the F-Type was originally launched for the model 2014 year in the US, and this was the first car that they launched. It was the Fire Sand F-Type V8S. You can find videos of this exact car, which is the car that I had, on Jay Leno's garage. He drove them right when they came out. A ton of reviewer videos and tests as well. Wonderful this car was from the XK that it replaced, and what a refresher it was to have Jaguar producing a proper sports car again. It's interesting to note that during the course of the model years, the F-Type changed little by little until the most recent major refresh in 2020 with the facelifted car. I'm not going to get into subjective details of what I think about the car, because the new car versus the old car, because I feel like that thread has already been beaten to death in the first 12 months the car's been out. I'm not even going to get into that. I will tell you, though, that the first car does look better than the new one, but that's it. That's all I'm going to say about that. But over the course of 2014 to 2020, when they did the big refresh, Jaguar introduced very incremental and small changes year over year over year, to the point where it can be confusing for a prospective owner or someone who's not an F-Type aficionado. And I'm going to use my H1 Hummer model here to cruise in my little F-Type model. It can be very confusing for prospective owners to know the differences between the different models. I think the variation is to the point where Most modern manufacturers like BMW and Porsche have so many different models now. It's like, what's the difference between the S and 4S? Or what's the difference between the S and the GTS Club Coupe and the 530 to the 528 to the 535i to the 540 to the 550 to the 560, and it goes on and on and on. There's so many iterations and displacement changes and things like that. The F-Type is no different, but what's unique about the F-Type is that it's never had a displacement badge. So in identifying an F-Type and what kind it is, there's some very simple ways to know what kind of F-Type you're even looking at. So I'll give you an example here. So in this particular model, this is the 2014 launch car that I'm doing my reviews on. And you'll note that the backside has 4 exhaust tips. Any F-Type of any year with 4 exhaust tips, 2 on one side, 2 on the other side, is a V8 car. That's it. If the exhaust tips are in the middle, right here, like a Boxster center exhaust or a GT3 Porsche or anything like that, or a Lotus, they're in the middle, it's either a 4-cylinder or a 6-cylinder car. That's all you need to know to identify what kind of engine is in the F-Type you're looking at. Now, if you carry on into badges and details, all F-Types have a center grille badge right here in the front of the car. And then they have a second badge on the deck lid on the back side of the car right here. And so over the model years, they changed. So originally, there was only a base model in 2014 and an S model. Now, the base model was a 340 horsepower supercharged 6-cylinder engine. It had all of the basic equipment as options and accoutrements that the V8 model had. And the V8 model was the S. It had 490 horsepower supercharged 5-liter V8. Okay, so those were your 2 choices. Both cars came equipped with an 8-speed ZF automatic gearbox, an excellent gearbox, which I'll talk about in other reviews and other videos. The standard equipment, standard color palette was a mix of metallic reds, blues, whites, and this launch color fire sand orange with all the other normal colors you would imagine, silver, white, and black, and et cetera, et cetera. Color choices for the interior were very limited. You had black, you had tan, like a saddle color, you had red, and you had like a light gray, which is probably the most uncommon color that you can find in an F-Type interior is the light gray color, but not necessarily the most desirable. Stitching packages were limited. With the fire sand orange car, you had fire sand orange. Otherwise, with the darker colors, there was a deviated black stitching. Some had red stitching, but the interior color combos and trim packages were pretty limited. So what changed? So in 2014, we had the base with the 6-cylinder supercharged engine producing 340 horsepower and the V8 producing about 490 horsepower. Okay, it's a pretty big power gap. Now that you look at it, driving both back to back, I ended up picking a V8S for the power reasons because we're talking about a 50% power jump between the cars. Again, not a road I want to go down. You know, the 6 versus the 8. You'll see a lot of modding questions and forums and threads on Facebook and this and that about, you know, oh, if I add all these things to my V6, you know, I'll get to 480 horsepower. Well, but the V8s start at around 480, 490 horsepower. So why not just, if you're gonna mod, I'll just tell you this right now, spoiler alert for the mod video, just buy the V8 straight up. Save your money, save your time. And you could put that same amount of money that you would put towards a V6 towards a V8 and you get crazy power from that. 2015, they released the base, the S V6, and the S V8. What? Yes, there are two S models for 2015. And all the cars are rear drive at this point as well, I might add. All rear drive, all 8 speeds. That's all they had, right? So you have a base, 340 horsepower supercharged V6. You have an S, 380 horsepower supercharged V6. And then you have a S V8, a V8 with an S, or an S with a V8 or whatever. The supercharged 5-liter continued for another year. 2015 is also the first year that they introduced the coupe. Then mid-year, they also revealed and introduced that they were going to bring out a 6-speed manual gearbox, available only in the base and S 6-cylinder engines, not in the S V8 configuration for whatever reason. But they released a coupe. They released the coupe across the different model lineup. Then they dropped the V8 S moniker, and then decided to call it the R. So thus, the F-Type R was born in the V8. So this is a very common point of confusion, because now by model year late 2015, 2016, now we have an R, an S, and a base. You have the R producing about 500 and I think it was 50 horsepower, 525, somewhere between there, 525 and 550. You have the V6S producing 380, and you have the base producing like 340. Now all available in coupes, and only a stick available in the 6-cylinder models. Now the time has passed. People will look at your F-Type or your prospective F-Type, or if you're shopping for an F-Type, and you'll see S on the back, and they'll be like, oh, what kind of, oh, it's an S. I'm like, yeah, it's the V8. And they'd be like, well, but no, it's an S. And most people don't know, unless you're a car nerd like myself, or probably you are for watching this video, or you're an owner, that the original F-Types, like this, like the one that Jay Leno drove, like the one we're going to show all on the series, came with a V8, but it was badged as an S. So I think after a year or two of that going on and just being downright confusing, Jag just dropped the badge altogether and made an R, which is a classic Jaguar performance line logo anyways, an R model, R line, right? So that made sense. So what happened next? Well, for whatever reason, when they increased the power on the R, they ultimately decided that after another brief period of production time, that around late 2015, 2016-ish model years, that they would make the R all-wheel drive. So this was the first introduction of all-wheel drive to the model line. Why would they bring all-wheel drive into the F-Type line? Well, I think there were two reasons for that. One, the F-Type is more innately, it is more of a grand tour than a hardcore sports car. We'll get into the driving dynamics and characteristics of the car in later videos, but when you compare an F-Type to and I'm going to say this a lot, so please bear with me, a 911, the benchmark, a Porsche, it's heavier. It's not as nimble, and it's a little bit of a cushier ride. To give it perspective, a 991 at the time of this car's release, a Carrera S or even a base Carrera, which made a lot less power, but was much, much lighter, was more of a sports car oriented car versus this being a GT car. A comparative 911 of a 2014 model year, it weighs in at about 3,200, 3,300 pounds. And this car was almost 3,900 pounds. It's a lot. Now, is it as heavy as a SL Mercedes? No, or CL, whatever at the time they had. The big convertibles and coupes? No. Is it as heavy as a Maserati Gran Turismo? No. but it's too heavy to be a true sports car, in my opinion. And so I think that was the biggest area of opportunity, that if Jaguar had been able to change something and go back, they could have made the car lighter. Instead of making the car lighter, they just added more power. So from 2014 onwards, every iteration got more power over time, especially the V8 cars. So you had all-wheel drive added for the purposes, I believe, for GT all-weather daily driving, but more so just for control and traction management. When this car came out originally in rear-wheel drive, it's the lightest V8 iteration they made. It's the most nimble iteration they made. It's also the most tail-happy iteration they made, and a lot of owners complained. They said the car's too powerful, I can't control it. Well, having owned one and putting over 54-ish thousand miles on my Ftype over the course of 3 years, I can tell you that the car had a lot of throttle oversteer when you wanted it, but it was very controllable and very easy to manage. However, the owners complained, and the journalists on these reviews were like, oh, it's crazy, it's insane. Like, how could they put this much power in a rear drive car? It's borderline dangerous. It really isn't. If you've had any other sports cars, I think in this power range, you wouldn't think that there's anything crazy about it. I think the combination of the exhaust sound, the rear drive, this and that, all kind of added up to, this is too much, and the owners were complaining. So subsequently, they introduced all-wheel drive, and they also started releasing tunes to make the car quieter. And at the same time, they kept tweaking the horsepower along the way. I think what's very, very interesting is that along the way, they added more power. They also added more weight with all-wheel drive and some additional equipment, which I think is actually, they went in the wrong direction. I think it would have been better if they would have lightened the car. But interestingly enough, the V8, a nice tidbit of knowledge, the V8 in the original 2014 Ftype, all the way to the newest Ftype, even the facelifted car, now in 2020, or the newest version, whatever we like to call it, it's the same engine. It's the same 5-liter V8 engine in every single V8 model. The only thing they changed was the software. They just tweaked the software and tweaked the boost. So what's cool about this, and again, we'll talk about this in the performance video, is that the car is very, very responsive to modding, and the power gains can be insane because the engine is effectively the same. All they're doing is tweaking boost and horsepower. They made some cosmetic changes over time. They changed the bonnets, they changed the vents, wheels, and other trim, but otherwise, it's basically the same car as in the original formula. Now, if we look back at the V6 models, they changed in the same manner too. Different sets of wheels, different interior pieces and trim. In conclusion, I know that this is a very long first overview video that we didn't even really get into a lot of the details, but just something to know if you're shopping for an F-Type. There's really 3 engine configurations over the entire lifetime of the car. Lastly, they introduced the 4-cylinder variant, right, which is the most recent car. I think they call that the P300 or something like that. It's actually the first model designation where they put a power, I think it stands for Power 300 or something like that. It has 300 horsepower. So to wrap up your different power configurations, power plant choices, you have a V8 F-Type available from 2014 all the way to the newest model, with anywhere from 485 horsepower to 605 horsepower from the factory, all with the 8-speed automatic transmission, and rear-wheel drive only available for the first 2 model years, and then all-wheel drive subsequently thereafter. You have a V6 model that has anywhere from a base of 340 horsepower to 380 horsepower in your S models, with the 8-speed transmission and the somewhat rare and quirky 6-speed manual transmission. And then you have the newest iteration, which is the 4-cylinder, making somewhere close to 300 horsepower. All available in convertibles, all available in coupe models as well. Now, when we get into V8 models, there are more model designations beyond just a base and an S and an R and all that kind of stuff. For whatever reason, Jaguar decided to take the V8 and make that its performance line, and the 6-cylinder has really just been a base and an S. So with the V8, and why it gets even more confusing, is that you have the original car, which is an S, you have the next car, which is an R, then you have an SVR, you have a Project 7. So there's 4 different variations, 4 different logos on V8 cars. So it's a little bit confusing. The Ftype also came in a variety of different wheel styles and sizes. All Ftype wheels are a 5x108 bolt pattern, and all Ftype wheels are interchangeable with each other. There's no difference in the size of the fender gaps or offset or anything like that between one model or another that wouldn't let you swap them on from one car to the other. So base level Ftypes came standard with 18-inch wheels, staggered, all the way up to the V8 models, which came with 20-inch wheels, staggered. There's a variety of different styles of wheels, finishes that Jaguar offered, and I believe that if there was anything that Jaguar offered a large variety of, it was different wheel types and finish types for all the Ftype models. The original launch car in this case, for example, was launched with a 20-inch Cyclone wheel. You'll see that the wheels are black. Jaguar also offered a optional black pack for cars where it effectively blacked out certain pieces of trim, the hood vents, the side vents, and the wheels. So the black pack, pretty self-explanatory. The Ftype also came with 2 different types of brake sets over the years. The original Ftypes, both V8 and the V6, were only available with steel brakes. Later on down the line, with the R and SVR, they started to offer carbon ceramics as an option. They're pretty uncommon. They were pretty pricey in the first place. It's easy to distinguish the color difference or the type of brake difference based on the color of the caliper. All steel brakes are red, and all ceramic brakes have a yellow caliper. The power levels and the prices and the rarity and the packages just vary quite a bit over the model run, but I hope that gives you some perspective on that. And so that wraps up our first video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Feel free to comment and subscribe. I'll be making lots of future videos on the Ftype and other cars as well, about performance, ownership costs, reliability, maintenance, and all those other fun topics. But, yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.